Hello everybody, Average Gamer. Welcome to episode 2 of our tutorial series on Supreme Ruler Ultimate. So in this episode we're going to go into just the 4 major areas that you're going to look at, mainly through the UI, and just give a brief synopsis of what each one is. So the first section you're going to look at is the actual main section here, which is the world. You can interact through with your towns and cities by clicking on them, getting some information on the left here. You can click on them and see your different buildings. There's also filters later on that show up on the map. So for example, we want to know where all the coal is. We hit the coal button. We can see, right? So this is your main way you're going to interact with the world. You get to see your borders, where different countries are, and all that stuff, which we'll get into. But this is your main interaction with the world of Supreme Ruler Ultimate. Next section is up here, which is your date and time, your pause and play, your clock, your 24-hour clock. This little thing tells you paused, how much money you have, whether it's going up or down. And this has access to your regional atlas. So it shows you all the general information as to what's available and all that stuff. It's kind of like the encyclopedia Supreme Ruler when it comes to who has what and where they where they sit, which we'll get into. And there's also the daily figures or annual figures button that shows you your numbers basically yearly or daily. I always tell people keep them on daily, because keeping them yearly is just the numbers end up way too big and way too stupid. Then you have your game menu button, which can also be accessed through hitting escape. It'll show you the scenario you picked, when you started, how big each hex is, which it's going to be 16 kilometers no matter what, the victory type. If there's a lot, it gives you little things we set up there. And then over here, which is still part of these three here, is your, I call it my news feed, my news bar. So the first one is your diplomatic news bar. So if you have anything diplomatic, whether it's a country offering you something, you offer another country and you're getting a counter offer, or so an offer goes through or gets rejected. If a country declares independence or falls internally, any information associated with that will be here. So some country offers you, timber or food in the way of agriculture. You'll get the notification saying, hey, Canada's offered you X amount of tonnage of, product A for this much money. What do you think? Things like that. The next one is the espionage little thing. The little button down here. Kind of looks like James Bond. If you send your spies out, and any of them are captured, or have any feedback saying, whatever they're doing, espionage-wise, it'll pop up there. So if you're trying to slowly build up a revolt in a third-party country, it'll pop up and tell you, hey, right now nothing's happening really, but we're going to continue our efforts. If one of your spies gets captured, it'll tell you, hey, your spy got captured. Or if your spy evaded capture, it'll say, hey, Russia found out you had a spy here, but your spy got away. And this one down is defensive. Here is where if you have new units units that are being built, it'll pop up and tell you that you have X amount of locations to be able to be built, which we'll get into. This is also where when you go to war, it'll tell you if you're losing units or not. It'll also tell you if you're losing territory. This is mainly your military feedback. Next one's your research feedback. So this is a button where when you find your research, it'll pop up and tell you, hey, you have new research. This is also the button there when it tells you, hey, you should research the following thing. Kind of like a recommendation. It pops up there as well. If there's any breakthroughs, which basically means you found a research thing, that's pretty much it, to be honest with you. Units research as well pops up in there. Down here, the money screen is just that. It's your money. This is where you find out if your unemployment's too high. If a commodity that you have is, really in the shit. Like it'll pop up and say, hey, we're gonna run out of the following resource like tomorrow. You need to figure out what you're gonna do to fix it now, type thing. Whenever you do any building, it'll tell you you're doing building, any military or not. Military thing up here as well. When you build a military facility, when it comes online, it pops up there and tells you. Here is the world events button. So whenever something happens in the world, this will pop up and tell you. So, for example, right now it's telling us that there's an atomic bomb test on the 8th, done by the USSR. And because we're in the Cold War version of the game, you can we're actually pretty much in all versions of the game now. You can either support an action or condemn an action. Whether you support or condemn will actually affect the country's relation with you a small little bit. That's the third-party effects. So, for example, right now we can approve, we can support Russia from detonating this bomb by saying, "Hey, we support you," or we condemn it, and it actually will hinder our opinion of one another. Then here's the Chinese Civil War. That's just a quick little update saying, "Hey, there you go. There's the Chinese War. Blah 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 blah." It resumes after conclusion. Hostiles cease the newly founded People's Republic of China controlling the mainland, basically saying, we're going to be, right after the end of World War II, our Civil War continued up, and then now we're in peace because we've conquered the entire land, and the only thing left that's the Republic of China is Taiwan. So there you go. And last but not least is the news feed. So this is when a country falls. Internally or externally, it pops up there. If someone hits a landmark for certain things like the nuclear arms race, the space race, the technology race, the Mars race, it'll pop up there. Next is the buttons is the main section you'll be using the most. So we're just going to go through these buttons here and kind of give you a brief breakdown of what each one is. So the first one here is your land tab. So this will give you any information associated with any piece of land that you've selected. So we select this and it says, hey, low combat, low visibility. It's got high ground, it's dry, and it's clear. Like the weather's clear. There's 3,480 people living on it. And here is the XYZ of it. You can click on town, for example. It'll give you the name of the town, the population, information, and the supply as well. Supply becomes very important later on when you're dealing with the military stuff. Now, there's these buttons here. So the first one is strategic targeting. This is when you go into nuclear war. We'll get into that. The next one is just use and presence. This will tell you what units are currently on that section of the map. Facilities and complexes. Pretty much 90% of the time, it's just gives you a generic overall world-wise which one it is. It'll tell you if it's active. One thing I kind of wish it did show in this screen, if I clicked on it, would be the amount that it creates. It shows how it's active. It shows what it costs. It shows how many military goods it uses and industrial goods and how much maintenance it costs. But in the end, it's not showing how much material it is creating. So that's one of the problems I have with it. The next one is your hotspots. So later on, I'll get into the military part of the thing, where you can create military hotspots, where if there's going to be fighting, it's going to be a major point of fighting. You can set those up. The next one is your battle zone, which we'll get into momentarily. Basically, every theater is broken up into multiple zones that are basically fought over. You don't have to specifically fight over a zone if you don't want one, but it's a good way to kind of take the large battle and fight it piece by piece. That way, it doesn't matter how big your country is, you can at least set up certain things with certain territories in certain areas where you can tell the AI, this is where I really want you to focus, because there's going to be a big battle here. So, like for example, say we were going to go to war with Mongolia. There's a couple areas around here that we could do that with, but we'll get into that a little later. Next one's theater controls. So the world's broken up, and I think it's like 20 theaters, give or take, and you can give its information. Now, the theater control and the battle zone control, you'll notice, are exactly the same, other than theater control has diplomatic focus and espionage priority. It's a good thing to use this, both diplomatic focus and espionage priority, because then it also helps affect your sphere of influence in your area. And last but not least, satellites. So communication satellites, reconnaissance satellites, obviously for your military, and missile defense satellites. This shoots down aircraft and missiles coming in your country. This one's your diplomatic or your state option. So this gives you information on your country. If you click this, it breaks down to the entire world if you can search for it. It also gives you your diplomacy ranking, your economy ranking, your military ranking, and your domestic ranking. It tells you how much your immigration is, how many births you have for a year, how many deaths you have. Well, actually, going by month here. Or no, this is actually by year, sorry. It shows you what your literacy is. It also shows where your political leanings towards and what your actual government type is. And then down here shows your military approval rating, domestic approval rating, treaty integrity, allies, people you're at war with, and last but not least, colonies, aka puppets. And then there's the options down here. So here is your actual minister. So here's our cabinet minister. He's Frank Tomlinson, because, you know, nothing says Chinese like someone named Frank. And you can get into all this stuff with the funding and all that stuff with them. You can click a different country to negotiate. What? Oh, sorry, that's just your actual your economic exchange stuff. For a second there, I kind of got confused. Then there's your influence information. So when you click on a country, you can actually pick what you want to do to influence it. You know, fund insurgencies, military stuff, government support, trading information, things like that. This is basically your severe actions button, or basically your declaration of war button. It'll tell you, you know, what you want to do here. You can usually set this off at the beginning with a country you want to pick. Right now it shows, you know, we have an 11% justification towards the USSR if we go to war with them. And it gives you a little bit of additional information in there. Here's our spy button. So we can actually decide we want to send spies to Russia and just be like, hey, we want to focus. We want to set them to whatever, and we want to set it to high or whatever like that. And it'll send it all over the country automatically for you to collect unit information, espionage information, steal territory, or steal, tech specs, things like that. And then diplomatic, which is this button right here, it shows you, basically their allies, their enemies, their colonies, their puppets, all that stuff. And last but not least, the only thing you can build here is the Security Bureau and the Intelligence Academy. The Intelligence Bureau the Security Bureau really doesn't do much, to be honest with you. It just kind of helps internally your police force and kind of helps counter espionage, while the Intelligence Academy is espionage in general. Next one is your finances. So here is basically how you make money. It shows you what your outcome is, what your income is, your expenses, your income, how much money you're making, surplus or deficit, how many trades you've made, and overall how much money is in your treasury. And when you have a large debt or even a debt, it'll tell you you have it. Here's your minister button. Bring up your minister and look at your overall spending. Here's your income report, your expense report, trade reports, taxation window, social spending window, and then overall how much money you're spending on transportation, rails and roadway. Then you have your commodities or resource button. So this shows you and breaks down all the different types of commodities that you have. I'm really not going to get in depth with this because this one's kind of crazy, but it shows you the 11 commodities in the game. So you got power, uranium, metal, coal, oil, or petroleum, timber, rubber, agriculture, and then with those things you can create consumer goods, industrial goods, and military goods. Now it'll also tell you that industrial goods only takes certain of these materials, while consumer goods takes industrial goods plus materials, and military goods takes industrial goods plus materials. So at least something for you to think of. Some of these things here will actually take some of the other things, like if you do synthetic oil, for example, that takes coal and turns it into oil, things like that. It also shows you, how much money things are being made and all that stuff. So it breaks it down quite well. Shows you, who's you're importing stuff, exporting, facility controls by building facilities and things like that. Then you have your research. So here is earlier what I said, where there was the progress So you got your race for the bomb, space race, internet race, and race to Mars. All the different milestones along those. The little building button down here to build facilities. Here, the little tab here, the little beaker with the arrow is all your different things that you can research, which we'll get into later. And of course, your minister. Now, these two are a little different. This first one is your defense production. This is where you actually build your units. So you have your minister, your actual build queue, so you can actually select your unit and build it. Here is your auto build, so you can actually just tell the computer, this is what I want you to build, and this is how I want you to build it. Your alert condition, or your DEFCON. So right now we're currently at an elevated level of alert. Battle zone button again, theater control button again, and then overall complexes. So we can build all our different military facilities from this screen. You can tell them where to build it. And the next button is, did I forget anything? Oh, and then here is your different types of things. So your military, your Air Force, your Navy, and your missiles. Here it tells you how many units you have in reserve, and this is how many tells you we have deployed right now. This is only going to be 0 because we literally haven't even unpaused the game yet. And then here is your active personnel. So right now we have 175,400 people active, but we have 1.3 million people in reserve. We have a total of 428 units. 497 units. You can actually select each one of these little buttons here, and it tells you how many. So we have 428 land units, 14 air units, and 55 naval units. And by the little logo here, so it's a dockyard, an air force, or an airstrip, and a barracks. Now here is your cabinet minister as well. And you can set up the initiative. Now the initiative is basically the computer AI control. So you can set it usually to something other where the AI has 100% control, and there you go. Or low, or none, sorry, where you have control. You can also lock them out of certain things. You can give certain orders to things, global rules of engagement, deployment of missiles, both strategic and non-strategic, and then obviously building of military facilities. I'm just going to minimize that and get that out of the way. So then the next part is the little mini-map here. So just like most mini-maps in most games, it's got all the different buttons here in the bottom. And you hold over and you see which one. So this is the weather overlay. This shows you the weather in the world. So we got a bit of some rain going on in the world. Here is the water location overlay. If you click it, this shows you where rivers are. If you go to war, these are always going to be either really easy to go over if you have amphibious units, or in most of these cases, you won't have amphibious units and you'll have to use engineers to bridge them, or go over bridges, or go around. So say someone was invading us and had no amphibious units, and they had pushed us all the way over the country, I would mostly put the majority of my troops in this area here, because we know they couldn't invade from here or here, and they'd only be able to attack here. And I'd actually withdraw a significant amount of troops into this area, and then down into this area. So that we could actually use this little black strip here to support ourselves and run supplies through. The next section on the map is the grid overlay. So screw line. The whole map it's just all hexes basically. When you click it, it's a circle, but technically it's a hex-based game. The next one is the theater overlay. So earlier I mentioned there's a bunch of theaters. So here are all the theaters. So for example, we have the South Pacific Theater, I believe this one is. Yep. Then we have the North Pacific. Over here we've got the Northeast Asia, then we have South, then we have, I think this is the Oceanic Theater of Operations. Yep. And then we have Southeast Asia. I think this is Central Asia. Oh, nope. Central Asia, yep. And then we have, I have no idea actually what this one is. Then we have Eastern Europe, Middle East, Eastern Africa, Western Africa, Southern Africa, North Atlantic, South Atlantic, Central Europe, Northern Europe, Western Europe. So, world's broken up, and then here we have East and West North America, Central America, Northern South America, North South American, South American, yeah. It's kind of, certain areas get a little iffy. So that is your theater overlay. Next one is your battle zone. So as I mentioned, a lot of theaters are broken up into different battle zones, and here they are. A lot of them are actually broken up, as you can see, by river zones and things like that. So if you ever invade a country, sometimes what you're doing is you're trying to push and capture that zone. Is an idea. Once you capture a zone, you can move in, fortify it, and then continue on. Though the computer and that's usually what the computer and the AI try to do. They try to move into a zone, secure it, and then move on to the next one. So if you ever noticed, like for example, you get invaded by, say, Vietnam here as a computer, you'll notice that it'll still try to move beyond this zone, but you'll notice that it'll try to push out a little bit. But then all of a sudden it'll hold up a little bit, and you'll notice them all of a sudden all moving towards this direction, or trying to move in this way or this way or this way. That's because they're going zone by zone, which is a good way if you're running, like I said, a large country, like Russia, for example. It's to play by the zones. Slowly work your zones, and, kind of situate yourselves that way. Like if you were playing as Russian, you're trying to invade Ukraine, I would make these zones on the east side of this river all my priority. But that's that. Next one is your supply. So notice there's like a bit of a colorful overlay on a lot of these maps. So like you'll notice that the Ukraine here has like a bit of a gray tinge to it. England's got a bit of a yellowy color, or like a aqua teal color. Russia's red. We're purple. It's China. US is blue. Canada's kind of like a teal as well. Same color as Cuba. So this shows you your overall supply. This shows you where your materials are getting to market, or can get to market. And then this also shows your military units. Your military units outside of these areas will have issues. Basically, they're not getting their food, their fuel. So you have to play the supply game as well, right? Like if we try to invade Burma here, the big problem will be we don't have even enough supply to even get to the border. So our units will be getting to the border, and then we'll be sitting there going, okay, we're having problems. Next part of the game is called line of sight. Right now, this shows us what we can see. So line of sight is what you can see. Later on, you can extend your line of sight using technologies and radars and AWACS, things like that, even satellites, to see where other countries' units are. So say we wanted to go to war here with Korea, for example. We could launch AWACS, radar sites along the border here, and see into the country, and make our decisions as to what to do. Next up is the map overship. This shows you, basically by color-coded, what country owns what. So you can see how kind of screwed up Europe is right now. Now you'll notice some countries, like the Ukraine here, have red dots. That's because Russia has USSR, has military bases in the Ukraine. They also have military bases in Kaliningrad as well. They got a naval base there. So whenever a country is puppeted by someone, whenever they build a military facility in them, they get that property, that territory. That's the way it's set up, right? That land is that country's land. Now, for example, when Malaysia here would gain independence from England, England would still give up this airbase. Say when Singapore gets independence from England, the English will give away and give to Singapore this military base. They won't keep it. So you don't have to worry about if you're playing like some third-party country. You don't have to worry about long-term, like say you're playing as Thailand here, and you're going to war with Malaysia. They have independence. You don't have to worry about that military base because it'll be part of Malaysia. So the next part is the loyalty overlay. So this shows you what countries are loyal to who. So you'll notice right here, for example, that this has a different color when we go to this screen here. Right? It shows that, hey, this is all purple. When we go to here, it's blue. That's because this is actually, I think it's called Outer Mongolia, or something like that. This is an actual different group of people altogether. That's why you see when you go to your line of sight, we have a penalization because we are hostile to those people are hostile towards us. So whenever you conquer a country, you have reduced line of sight in that country. Mainly because those people don't like you. You took over their country. They're not going to be nice. They're not going to give you information. So always using this map loyalty button can always be very important, especially later on when you've expanded your country. You can see what territories of your country people just don't like you, so that you know why your line of sight is so low, or you already know your line of sight is going to be low. The next one is your Garrison Overview. This shows you where your garrison troops are. Now this is not going to light up for us because right now we have no troops available, but you'll see little red dots just showing you where all your garrison troops are. This part is the high ground, so if you're actually in a war with someone, you know if you hold these spots, your artillery will be more efficient, your troops will be more efficient if you're holding the high ground versus the enemy attacking into the high ground, so you know. Like say for example we invade Vietnam, we push down this area here, but we hold our units in these two spots here, and we wait and let the Vietnamese come up this way. We know that the Vietnamese units are going to get a penalty for attacking into us here. Next part is the close combat overlay. So these are areas where combat will be classified as close combat, meaning that it's forested, it's hilly, it's towns, villages, cities. Mostly it comes down to forested and where towns and villages are. Pretty much. Like you see most of the trees there. The trees are also a lot thicker, you'll notice, in those areas when they're not, so the idea there to remember. And then last but not least, the defensive terrain overlay. So this shows you the darker it is, the more defensive it is. So if you're attacking into it, you'll know how effective the other team will be, or the other units will be in defending it. So whether, you'll get a negative effect towards these things. So there you go. So that is the overview of all these buttons here and what they do. In the next episode, we will go over in depth each and every single one, starting with, these buttons over here, actually. We'll go into detail on these things first. Anyways, see you guys next time. Bye-bye.